The genius was to manage the automaton, and the other was to lay out the campaign, choose the victims, and collect the money, geniuses being notoriously unreliable and loose in their cash. They got through a great deal of whisky on the way up, and when they arrived at 9 Mile were in a cheerful mood and disposed to take risks. "Who'll we begin on?" said the genius. "Oh, hang it all," said the other. "Let's make a start with Macpherson." Macpherson was a land agent and the big bug of the place. He was a gigantic Scotsman, 6'4" in his socks, and freckled all over with freckles as big as half-crowns. His eyebrows would have made decent moustaches for a cavalryman, and his moustaches looked like horns. He was a fighter from the ground up, and had a desperate down on canvassers generally, and on Sloper and Dodge's canvassers in particular. Sloper and Dodge had published a book called Remarkable Colonials, and Macpherson had written out his own biography for it. He was intensely proud of his pedigree and his relations, and in his narrative made out that he was descended from the original Tahitian who swam round Noah's Ark with his title deeds in his mouth. He showed how his people had fought under Alexander the Great and Timor, and had come over to Scotland some centuries before William the Conqueror landed in England. He proved that he was related in a general way to 1 emperor, 15 kings, 25 dukes, and earls and lords and viscounts innumerable. And then, after all, the editor of Remarkable Colonials managed to mix him up with some other fellow, some low-bred Irish Macpherson, born in Dublin of poor but honest parents. It was a terrible outrage. Macpherson became president of the Western District branch of the Remarkable Colonials Defence League, a fierce and homicidal association got up to resist, legally and otherwise, paying for the book. He had further sworn by all that he held sacred that every canvasser who came to harry him in future should die, and had put up a notice on his office door, "Canvassers come in at their own risk." He had a dog of what he called the Hold'em breed, who could tell a canvasser by his walk, and would go for him on sight. The reader will understand, therefore, that, when the genius and his mate proposed to start on Macpherson, they were laying out a capacious contract for the cast-iron canvasser, and could only have been inspired by a morbid craving for excitement, aided by the influence of back-block whisky. The inventor wound the figure up in the back parlour of the pub. There were a frightful lot of screws to tighten before the thing would work, but at last he said it was ready, and they shambled off down the street, the figure marching stiffly between them. It had a book tucked under its arm and an order form in its hand. When they arrived opposite Macpherson's office, the genius started the phonograph working, pointed the figure straight at Macpherson's door, and set it going. Then the two conspirators waited, like Guy Fawkes in his cellar. The automaton marched across the road, and in at the open door, talking to itself loudly in a hoarse, unnatural voice. Macpherson was writing at his table and looked up. The figure walked bang through a small collection of flower pots, sent a chair flying, tramped heavily in the spittoon, and then brought up against the table with a loud crash and stood still. It was talking all the time.
"I have here," it said, "a most valuable work, an atlas of Australia, which I desire to submit to your notice. The large and increasing demand of bush residents for time payment works has induced the publishers of this."
"My God!" said Macpherson. "It's a canvasser! Here, Tom Sayers, Tom Sayers!" And he whistled and called for his dog. "Now," he said, "will you go out of this office quietly, or will you be thrown out? It's for yourself to decide, but you've only got while a duck wags his tail to decide in. What shall it be?"
"Works of modern ages," said the canvasser. "Every person subscribing to this invaluable work will receive, in addition, a flat iron, a railway pass for a year, and a pocket compass. If you will please sign this order." Just here Tom Sayers came tearing through the office, and, without waiting for orders, hitched straight onto the canvasser's calf. To Macpherson's amazement, the piece came clear away, and Tom Sayers rolled about on the floor with his mouth full of a sticky substance which seemed to surprise him badly.
The long Scotsman paused a while before this mystery, but at last he fancied he got the solution.
"Got a cork leg, have you?"
said he.
"Well, let's see if your ribs are corked too."
And he struck the canvasser an awful blow on the 5th button of the waistcoat. Quicker than lightning came that terrific right-hand cross-counter. Macpherson never even knew what happened to him. The canvasser's right hand, which had been adjusted by his inventor for a high blow, had landed on the butt of Macpherson's ear and dropped him like a fowl. The gasping, terrified bulldog fled the scene, and the canvasser stood over his fallen foe, still intoning the virtues of his publication. He had come there merely as a friend, he said, to give the inhabitants of 9 Mile a chance to buy a book which had recently earned the approval of King O'Malley and His Excellency the Governor-General. The genius and his mate watched this extraordinary drama through the window. The stimulant habitually consumed by the 9 Milers had induced in them a state of superlative Dutch courage, and they looked upon the whole affair as a wildly hilarious joke.
"By gad, he's done him,"
said the genius, as Macpherson went down.
"Done him in one hit. If he don't pay as a canvasser, I'll take him to town and back him to fight Les Darcy. Look out for yourself, don't you handle him,"
he continued as the other approached the figure.
"Leave him to me. As like as not, if you go fooling about him, he'll give you a clout that'll paralyse you."
So saying, he guided the automaton out of the office and into the street and walked straight into a policeman. By a common impulse, the genius and his mate ran rapidly away in different directions, leaving the figure alone with the officer. He was a fully ordained sergeant, by name Aloysius O'Grady, a squat, rosy little Irishman. He hated violent arrests and all that sort of thing, and had a faculty of persuading drunks and disorderlies and other fractious persons to go quietly along with him that was little short of marvellous. Excited revellers who were being carried by their mates, struggling violently, would break away to prance gaily along to the lock-up with the sergeant. Obstinate drunks who had done nothing but lie on the ground and kick their feet in the air would get up like birds, serpent-charmed, to go with him to durance vile. As soon as he saw the canvasser and noted his fixed unearthly stare and listened to his hoarse unnatural voice, the sergeant knew what was the matter. It was a man in the horrors, a common enough spectacle at 9 Mile. He resolved to decoy him into the lock-up and accosted him in a friendly, free and easy way.
"G'day to you,"
he said.
"Most magnificent volume ever produced, jewelled in 14 holes, working on a ruby roller and in a glass case,"
said the book canvasser.
"The likenesses of the historical personages are so natural that the book must not be left open on the table, or the mosquitoes will ruin it by stinging the portraits."
It then dawned on the sergeant that this was no mere case of the horrors. He was dealing with a book canvasser.
Sure," he said. "What's the use of trying to sell books at all? Folks does be pelting them out into the street, and the nanny goats lives on them these times. I send the childer out to pick 'em up, and we have 'em at me place in barrow loads. Come along with me now, and I'll make you nice and comfortable for the night."
And he laid his hand on the outstretched palm of the figure. It was a fatal mistake. He had set in motion the machinery which operated the figure's left arm, and it moved that limb in towards its body, and hugged the sergeant to its breast with a vice-like grip. Then it started in a faltering and uneven but dogged way to walk towards the river.
"Immortal saints!"
gasped the sergeant.
"He's squeezing the living breath out of me. Lave go like a decent soul now, lave go. And oh, for the love of God, don't be spaking into me ear that way."
For the figure's mouth was pressed tight against the sergeant's ear, and its awful voice went through and through the little man's head as it held forth about the volume. The sergeant struggled violently, and by doing so set some more springs in motion, and the figure's right arm made terrific swipes in the air. A following of boys and loafers had collected by this time.
"Blimey, how he does lash out,"
was the remark they made. But they didn't interfere, notwithstanding the sergeant's frantic appeals, and things were going hard for him when his subordinate, Constable Dooley, appeared on the scene. Dooley, better known as the Wombat because of his sleepy disposition, was a man of great strength. He had originally been quartered at Sydney and had fought many bitter battles with the notorious pushers of Bondi, Surrey Hills and the Rocks. After that, duty at 9 Mile was child's play, and he never ran in fewer than 2 drunks at a time. It was beneath his dignity to be seen capturing a solitary inebriate. If they wouldn't come with him any other way, he would take them by the ankles and drag them after him. When the Wombat saw the sergeant in the grip of an inebriate, he bore down on the fray full of fight.
"I'll soon make him leave go, Sergeant,"
he said, and caught hold of the figure's right arm to put on the police twist. Unfortunately, at that exact moment, the sergeant touched one of the springs in the creature's breast. With the suddenness and severity of a horse kick, it lashed out with its right hand, catching the redoubtable Dooley a thud on the jaw and sending him to grass as if he'd been shot. For a few minutes he lay as only the dead men lie. Then he got up, bit by bit, wandered off home to the police barracks, and mentioned casually to his wife that John L. Sullivan had come to town and had taken the sergeant away to drown him. After which, having given orders that anybody who called was to be told that he'd gone 15 miles out of town to serve a summons on a man for not registering a dog, he locked himself up in a cell for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, the cast-iron canvasser, still holding the sergeant tightly clutched to its breast, was marching straight towards the river. Something had disorganised its vocal arrangements, and it was now positively shrieking in the sergeant's ear, and as it yelled, the little man yelled still louder.
"I don't want your accursed book. Leave go of me, I say."
He beat with his fists on its face and kicked its shins without avail. A short staggering rush, a wild shriek from the officer, and they both toppled over the steep bank and went souse into the depths of 9 Mile Creek. That was the end of the matter. The genius and his mate returned to town hurriedly and lay low, expecting to be indicted for murder. Constable Dooley drew up a report for the Chief of Police, which contained so many strange statements that the police department concluded the sergeant must have got drunk and drowned himself, and that Dooley saw him do it, but he was too drunk to pull him out. Anyone unacquainted with 9 Mile might expect that a report of the occurrence might have reached the Sydney papers. As a matter of fact, the storekeeper did think of writing one, but decided that it was too much trouble. There was some idea of asking the government to fish the 2 bodies out of the river, but about that time an agitation was started in 9 Mile to have the federal capital located there, and nothing else mattered. The genius discovered a pub in Sydney that kept the 9 Mile brand of whisky and drank himself to death. The Wombat became a sub-inspector of police. Sloper entered the Christian ministry. Dodge was elected to the federal parliament, and a vague tradition about "the bloke who came up here in the horrors and drowned poor old O'Grady" is the only memory that remains of that wonderful creation, the cast-iron canvasser. End of The Cast-Iron Canvasser by A. B. Banjo Paterson.